Okay, so let's continue. What do we have? We have the eye. We did some of the other cranial nerves that were associated with senses, but let's do the eye. Before we kind of look at this, these are some of the structures of the eye. It can get a little bit boring, but what I want to do is cover some of the high yield stuff with you guys. So palpebral fissure is basically this opening between the two eyelids, right? The eyelid on top, the eyelid on bottom, and they're called palpebrae or palpebrae. Eyelashes, we don't need to do that. Tarsal glands, okay. Lacrimal, no. Let's do conjunctiva. What is conjunctiva? Well, there's conjunctivitis, right? And what is conjunctivitis? That's pink eye. So when you have inflammation, itis is referring to inflammation again, right? So if you have inflammation on the eye, either it's conjunctiva is the membrane that covers the eye and it also covers the underside of the eyelid, right? So when you have pink eye, it turns it red because of some kind of irritation or maybe infection that's going on in there. So conjunctiva is the membrane, conjunctivitis is inflammation of that membrane. So this is the whites of your eye, right? This thing in the middle is the pupil. This is the iris. These guys on top and on bottom are palpebrae. And then this opening that allows you to see is called the palpebral fissure. Let's make it more fun. So I'm going to have you guys memorize a mnemonic to help you understand the pathway for light entering into the eye. It's simply light, crispy apples, very pricey old goal. Oh my goodness, the board is not long enough for me to finish and do this mnemonic on this tiny little thing. But that's okay. I'm just going to have to write smaller, right? So what does light stand for? Light stands for light. So light passes. What is the clear structure of the eye that lets light through? Well, that's simply the cornea. And then it passes through the cornea. So we're going to do major parts, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go back and describe the things that are around it that are not a part of the mnemonic, but you guys would, a lot of times it's easy to recognize, especially if you're studying. So we have the cornea, passes through the cornea. It's the clear layer of the eye. And then it goes through APL. So A is just aqueous humor. So the fluid inside the eye is called aqueous humor. Passes then through the hole. So we're not even talking about the colored portion of the eye. We're talking about passing through the hole. The hole is called the pupil, right? And then I have the thing that adjusts the image and the light that puts the image onto what we call the retina is the lens. And then behind the lens is this jelly substance, and the jelly-like substance is called vitreous humor. And vitreous humor is the jelly viscous substance of the eye. At the very back side is the retina, and the retina has something called photoreceptors. So there's two types of photoreceptors. There's rods and then there's cones. And how I remember the difference between the two is they're both photoreceptors, they receive light, but the difference is rods and cones. Rods is for night vision and it's also for peripheral vision. Cones, like the letter C says, is for color, clarity, acuity. So one more time. Cones are for color, clarity, acuity, and what are rods for? Night vision or peripheral vision. So the photoreceptors are found in what we call the retina. That's not in the mnemonic, so we're going to get to that soon. And then you have the O. This is really tiny and very ugly, but this is as good as it's going to get for the eyeball. So this is a shrunken version of what it normally would look like on my diagrams on the board. So O, optic nerve. On O, optic chiasm. On OC16, I don't know, oceanic channel, optic tract. So on ought, there's ought to be a mnemonic that's useful for this, and I still can't find it. So it's optic nerve followed by optic chiasm followed by optic tract. And then there's something called lateral geniculate body. Oh my my goodness. So I'll write that one out. So it's lateral geniculate body. And lateral geniculate bodies, because there's one on each side, will then send information through this tract over here. So you can either call it optic radiations, but I don't like that, so we're not going to use that in our mnemonic. It's actually called geniculocalcarine tract. So what it means is from this bend, also known as genu, from this bend, it's called geniculocalcarine tract. Geniculo Cal, my friend Cal or Calvin, is in his car and he's careening off the track. Horrible, right? So geniculocalcarine tract is also known as optic radiations. And it's basically the fibers that send information from the lateral geniculate body back into the brain. And what part of the brain is associated with the visual cortex? Well, O is optic. Oh, sorry, not optic. O stands for occipital lobe, right? So the part of the brain that has the visual cortex is occipital lobe. Ooh, let's do that all again. So we have like crispy apples, very pricey ogo. 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 Oh my goodness, the eye is intense, and so is hearing, but that's just the last chapter that you guys have to study before the semester is over. So here we go. What happens? Light passes through the cornea, which is the clear structure of the eye. What are the whites of the eye also known as? The sclera, right? So at the same level as the cornea, you also have the sclera. So light passes through the cornea, enters into the aqueous humor. So since we're doing the mnemonic, we're also going to add on top of that. Aqueous humor is fluid, right? So like the blood, if I have too much blood inside of my vessels, I can elevate pressure, right? So we call that high blood pressure, so also known as hypertension. Can't you do the same thing for the eye? Yes, you can. And so you can have something called glaucoma. So what is glaucoma? Glaucoma is elevated pressure of fluid inside of the eye. So it's an increase in aqueous humor. Too much aqueous humor, the same effects hold true for the eye. You can have damage to the retinal lining. You can have damage to the eye because of too much pressure inside of the eye. So how do I stop that? Well, we did autonomics, right? So we said alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, E, ret, E, ret, E. Alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, E, ret, E, ret, E. So how did I decrease heart rate? Well, how many hearts do you have? You have one heart. So where do you find beta 1 receptors? You find them in the heart, but you can also find them inside of the eye. So if I give a beta blocker in the heart, what is the suffix for a beta 1 blocker? It's olol. And this is just a side note. I'm not going to test you on this, but it's a really great way for you guys to look at this in terms of medicine. If I have somebody that has high aqueous humor, right, and let's say that they have overproduction of this fluid, how am I going to stop the production? I can give them a beta 1 blocker. Beta 1 blockers like timolol, right? Timolol block the production of aqueous humor and decrease the amount of pressure that's found in the eye because you decrease the amount of fluid that's in the eye. And that is one way that you can treat glaucoma. So what is glaucoma? Too much aqueous humor in the eye. There's two ways that it can happen. You either have overproduction or under removal. So typically your eye will produce and it'll also remove. And the canal that you pass through is called canal of Schlemm. I think there's two M's. So canal of Schlemm is the exit point. And if I have blockage in the canal of Schlemm, what do? You can either do some kind of surgery to remove the blockage if it's inside of the tunnel, or you can, there's other drugs that will help to relax the eye so that you remove or reduce the obstruction before this canal and this exit point. But we don't need to do that for this level. So again, aqueous humor, what was P? P was pupil, that's the hole, right? But what is the colored portion of the eye on the very outside? That's the iris. So the colored portion of the eye is the iris. The hole in the middle is the pupil. And then after the pupil, what do we have? We have the lens. Isn't there a dysfunction in the lens? Yes, there is. Let's see what this dysfunction of the lens is. Well, if I have a window and I spray it with let's say it's Christmas time, and I have that white clear or that whitish opaque frost, and I spray it with the frost, what happens to my ability to see through that window? Well, I have impaired vision, right? So with the lens, I have something called cataracts. And what are cataracts? Well, cataracts are clouding of the lens. And when I cloud the lens, I can't see through it. So how do you fix cataracts? Well, you can't fix it once it has clouding, but you can remove it and you can surgically replace it with some kind of implant. So cataracts, I fix it by replacing with another lens. Okay, so we have lens, and then what's after the lens? What's the viscous, very jelly-like substance? Vitreous humor, and then what do I have after that? I have photoreceptors. What are the two types of photoreceptors? I have rods and cones. Which one is associated with night vision? Rods. Which one is associated with peripheral vision? Rods again. Which one is associated with color clarity acuity? That's cones. There's when we do the PowerPoint, then we can cover the colors. But where do you find photoreceptors? Well, this is added. We find it on the retina. And then the retina, behind the retina, there's all these blood vessels. And so what happens, why do we have all these blood vessels? One, to take nutrients to and from the eye, but also to act as almost like an absorbing unit. So let's say that I have a shiny eye, or let's take a bowl, a mixing bowl, and let's say the mixing bowl is metallic, and I shine a light in it. And then I look into the bowl as I'm shining the light. What happens to the light? It bounces everywhere, right? And then it blinds you as you're looking into it. So how do I ensure that I'm not blinding myself when light enters into my eye? I have these things called the choroid. And the choroid is a bunch of blood vessels. And what do? All the extra light that's refracting all over the place, instead of having it refract everywhere and blind you, it actually is absorbed into these blood vessels. So any extra light that might be bouncing off is absorbed into the blood vessels called the choroid, and it diminishes blinding, right, by the light that's entering into your eye. So again, what do we have? We have the retina, and what do you find in the retina? We find photoreceptors. What do you find in the back of the retina? Blood vessels. What's the name of the blood vessels? Choroid. And then after I have photoreceptors, rods, cones, I enter into optic nerve, right? It's a nerve, and then I cross over at the optic chiasm. And then I finally have the optic tract. It ends in the lateral geniculate body, then moves through the geniculocalcarine tract, and finally ends on your occipital lobe, which contains your visual cortex. Break time.